Hello and welcome to The Bad Spot and our 1000 subscriber Q&A. Now, I've only been doing this channel for 7 months, I think, and I've been absolutely blown away by just how many of you weirdos out there like to tune in each week and listen to me talk to myself. But from the bottom of my heart, I would like to say thank you. Thank you a million times. Thank you for all the likes, all the subscribes, and all the comments you've been leaving me. I feel like I'm building a nice, pleasant little community in our corner of the internet, and I kind of dig it. So thank you. And I thought it would be nice to mark the occasion, to celebrate the milestone with a bit of a Ask Me Anything. So I did indeed ask you all to do that, to ask me anything, and I got a lot of questions sent in. And I'm not going to get to all of them. I do apologize in advance because there was a lot. And I don't want to take up any more of your time than I already do. So, without any further ado, let's jump right to it. Hey, Carlos on Twitter asks, what is your favourite moment of the season? So, it's a good question. There are a few, I think, that stand out to me. Firstly, I think the jungle escape on Damu with the radioactive kangaroos seemed to a lot of people seem to like that, and I enjoyed playing it, and also rolling up those creatures using the tables was a lot of fun. It was kind of a blast to kind of see what weird concoction we could come up with, and I think what we did come up with was super memorable and yeah, frightening, and almost killed Archer. Kel surprise. I also think the introduction of Luna to the show was a huge moment, especially as I kind of rolled her up as an NPC to give Archer some information. He was trying to find Blake Sutton. He needed to get her whereabouts, and I needed someone in the spaceport on Rust who would be able to give that information. So this character got rolled up, and a weak hit followed, which meant that I owed her something, which means I helped her with the demolition of the power plant. And, now Luna is co-lead of the show. So, way to go. Just from one weak hit. That's how these things kind of snowball. So that was a cool thing. Plus, I think the idea that she would be introduced with Archer standing up for her when she doesn't need to be stood up for, then being punched in the face and thrown through a plate glass window, just felt like the most detective noir moment that I could come up with in that kind of scene, and I got a real kick out of that because I love that stuff. I think lastly, the escape from Paxton Hold, because Archer was very nearly dead in that moment. He was literally one roll away from dying, and I think from a gameplay perspective, playing a character who is like totally on their last legs, who is next to useless. I mean, he's next to useless anyway, but for someone who like really can't do much at all, it's really interesting. Makes some interesting role play, and narratively, it was kind of fun to play someone who could barely stand up. Okay, next, Evan Wildwood on Twitter asks, what got you into TTRPGs? What was the first system you played? Well, it wasn't D&D, which I know is the case for a lot of people. It would have been kind of 1991, 1992. There was a kid who lived a few doors down from me, and he was kind of my gateway into nerd shit. And he was kind of heavy into it, and, he'd kind of lend me his copies of White Dwarf, and, we'd play Warhammer and stuff, and he told me that he'd got a game that didn't have any minis, didn't have any board, didn't really have much. He played all in your imagination, and it was Call of Cthulhu. And he sold it to me on the basis that your character could be driven mad. And I was so in. I was completely sold. And I think we played like 1 or 2 sessions maybe. And like really enjoyed it. I don't remember too much about the specifics of it. I do remember that there was a mystery at the heart of it, that I think it was the kind of one of the ones that came in the book. It was a pre-written adventure, and it was just me and this other kid, and he was kind of laying out all these clues for me to follow and to try and kind of solve this mystery, and I just wanted to shoot everything. I was just trying to shoot everything, and yeah, I loved it. I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't particularly that kind of sparked my love of it, even though I did really enjoy that. This kid also had another book this is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness role-playing game from Palladium Games. And this kid owned a copy, and after we'd played Call of Cthulhu, he was like, hey, do you want to play this Turtles game? And I was like, sure, why not? And we played it once, and that one session was enough for him to decide that it wasn't for him at all. And for me, it was the best thing I'd ever seen, because I don't know if you know how this game works, but you essentially completely randomly roll up a character from a series of tables, and that character is a randomly generated mutant animal with special powers. And I absolutely loved it. We played one session, like I said, then he lent me the book, then I took it away, and I didn't play the game ever again. I just rolled up characters. And I kind of just endlessly created this kind of menagerie of heroes and villains, and just kind of built this imaginary narrative around them without ever actually playing the game. And I think that cemented my love for kind of random tables and using them for kind of creative inspiration, which is probably why I like Iron Swan so much. I really want to do an episode where I randomly roll up a character for the Turtles game, because that would be a lot of fun. But I've kind of heard on the grapevine that Palladium Games are a little bit sniffy about their IP and don't kind of allow streamers and kind of content creators to show too much of what's in the book, which is a real shame, because there's amazing art in there and there's some wild tables. The game is based on the Palladium system, which is well, it's not good. It's not good. But the character generation is like some of the most fun I've ever had playing games. So that was the game that sparked that in me, and I then kind of moved away from nerd stuff for quite a long time. And it wasn't until 2015 that I played TTRPGs again, when I played the Star Wars RPG by Fantasy Flight Games, the Edge of the Empire one. Got a group together who I still play with weekly to this day. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. And that was a kind of a narrative-based system. It's got its problems, that Genesis system, but that was what kind of got me back into it. Next question, Manoloscar on Twitter asks, have you played Iron Swan in cooperative mode? I absolutely have, and I actually think that co-op is the best way to play Iron Swan. I don't think I'd ever play it guided. I don't really see what that would add. Solo is a lot of fun, and the only reason I'm doing this show solo is because I knew that I would make the schedule of one episode a week and I didn't have to rely on anyone else. But co-op is absolutely the funnest way to play this game. During the first lockdown in the UK, when we were all furloughed from work and we weren't allowed to go anywhere, I played a co-op game of Iron Swan with my buddy Tom, who was stuck in Spain, and we played over Skype every day, 2 hours a day for about 3 weeks, and it was an absolute blast. He'd never played Iron Swan before. I'd played it solo, but it was really fun trying to figure out how it works as a co-op adventure, and I think that is my next move. After Starforged Season 2 finishes, whatever I do will be co-op, and I've kind of got some beginnings of an idea, and working with another person, and we're kind of talking about it. We're in the early stages, but watch this space. But I've got a feeling that a co-op OG Iron Swan game is on the horizon after I finish Starforged. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. Okay, Joshua Meehan, lead artist on Starforged and ardent supporter of the show. He gets in touch on YouTube to ask, congrats on the milestone. What movies do you love and watch, and do they influence the kind of stories you enjoy to tell? They absolutely do. I love movies. I studied film at university, and kind of before doing this show, I was the co-host of a movie podcast for about 8 years. And so they're a big part of my life. I worked as a filmmaker for a bit. And my favorite type of movies to watch and enjoy, the ones that I kind of get the most out of, is movies from the New Hollywood era, which is kind of like the late 60s to the late 70s, early 80s. Movies like The Godfather, The Conversation, Chinatown, Jaws, Nashville, Taxi Driver, Harold and Maude, all those kind of movies. They're the ones I kind of love. But in terms of inspiring the stories I want to tell, a lot of what inspires me is kind of hard-boiled detective noir, and especially stuff like Dashiell Hammett's Red Harvest, or the movie inspired by that book, Miller's Crossing. And they've kind of, a lot of the elements of my show kind of crop up in detective noir stories, like a kind of lead character who is in way over their head. You've got kind of shadowy bad guys, factions being played off against each other. You've got the conduit in our story has elements of the archetypal femme fatale. And I just absolutely love that feel, that kind of hard-boiled feel, and I try and kind of bake as much of that into the show as I can. I think it's just cool. It's just really cool. I don't know why I like it so much, but I do. So yeah, also in terms of sci-fi stuff, I'd say the movie Silent Running is kind of tonally where I kind of fit, I think. And also that film is a direct influence on how I depict the relationship between Griff and Archer. So lesson there is, if you're going to steal from the best. Shane in the UK over on YouTube asks perhaps the most important question that we are going to be asked today. What type of dog do you own and what's its name? Well, Shane in the UK, this is Aoife, and she is a 6-year-old greyhound, an ex-racing dog who was not treated very well, unfortunately, so she is now enjoying her retirement with us. She enjoys sleeping for 18 to 20 hours a day, and she very much enjoys cheese and sardines, often together. She does not particularly enjoy loud noises or walking for longer than 10 minutes. But that said, if I am ever stuck on interpreting a role from the Oracle, then dragging Aoife off our bed and taking her out for a walk is by far the best cure for any creative blocks that I might be experiencing. Which leads us nicely to Thomas Brown on YouTube, who asks, what was a difficult role to interpret? Well, I know the answer to this one right away. It was, without a shadow of a doubt, the Oracle role in episode 17, and after Archer and Luna had escaped Paxton Hold and they kind of jumped a few times through the drift, they ended up at a scientific research station in the orbit of an ocean world, and I rolled on the Oracle for what the scientific research station looked like at first appearance, and I got something along the lines of looks like it's made of organic matter or organic appearance. And for the life of me, I could not figure out a way to make that work. But I was trapped by the fact that I thought it sounded cool and I thought it would be an interesting concept to explore. But oh my God, I could not make that work. I tried and I tried and I tried, and I sat there and I was kind of pulling my hair out, and then I had to just stop. I was recording that episode in the morning, and I think, and I just walked away and came back quite late at night. And I still hadn't really figured it out. I still hadn't really thought about why this station would have an organic appearance. All I'd kind of come up with was that it was something growing on the outside of the ship, not that it was built from organic matter. And even then, I just kind of settled on it and decided just to start recording. I only had that one day to finish that episode, and I just needed to get something in there and move on. And I just kind of put it in there and stopped thinking about it. And then in the next 2 episodes, kind of figured out that it was a bioweapon that had kind of gone wrong, that was ultimately part of an arms race in this kind of ongoing clan war, which Archer and Luna had been bang in the middle of, that's been driving our story for all this time. Now, I think it's because my brain subconsciously thought it was a cool idea, which wouldn't let me let go of it, but my conscious mind couldn't figure out a way to make it work. All I had to do was stop thinking about it, and then my subconscious did the rest. And like I've mentioned on the show many times, I was able to join the dots and connect it without it being forced or shoehorned in, which I really got a kick out of. But God damn it, that role, that was tough. Kavasek123 on YouTube asks, what other games do you enjoy and would recommend? My favourite TTRPGs are pretty much all powered by the Apocalypse games. I love that system. I love the flexibility it gives. I love the creativity it inspires. I just really enjoy playing that, and I think that my love of it was cemented by a Dungeon World campaign that I ran that lasted for 2 years, and it is one of the only campaigns, I think it might be the only campaign that I've ever finished. And I ran it for my group, and yeah, it took 2 years. Kind of went to a lot of weird places, but it was like super enjoyable. And playing that game really cemented my GMing style and really changed my approach to prep, first of all, and then also, how I build a world and how cooperative it should be with the characters, the control over the narrative, and the players at the table. It's a shared story rather than one person sat behind the screen telling people what happens. That really changed my perspective on things. In terms of other games that I would recommend, I would definitely recommend Fiasco. Fiasco is a blast and huge fun. I don't get to play it anywhere near as often as I want to, but that's a hugely fun game. Then I would also recommend Alice is Missing. I've got the physical copy here, but I actually think it's best enjoyed using the Roll20 app, playing remotely. If you don't know, it's a role-playing game that is played entirely using WhatsApp or like a messenger service. But also there's a kind of a Roll20 interface for the game's mechanics, which is like super fun. That's an experience. Alice is Missing is an experience rather than a game. It's pretty remarkable. I'd recommend it. I would also recommend 10 Candles, which is a game that we've played a few times, and I still don't think I've 100% cracked it yet, but it's remarkable. The design is incredible, and the atmosphere it can create, especially if you really commit to playing in the dark, is awesome. We did it a couple of Halloweens in a row and played it with fairly seasoned role players and also complete noobs who'd never played a role playing game before. And yeah, the kind of the way that people got into it and were kind of drawn into the atmosphere of it was amazing. If you don't know, it's a game played by the light of 10 candles, and scene by scene you keep blowing them out, and when they're all out, everyone's dead. Everyone's going to die at the start, and it's no secret. You just have to kind of determine how you do it, and it's an amazing storytelling game. And I'm sure, like most of you, I have a lot of games that I've downloaded that I've read but not actually played. Top of my list is I've got a really good idea for a Monster of the Week campaign that I really want to play. But that's just it. There's too many games and not enough time, unfortunately. Okay, John Brower on YouTube asks, are there any aspects of the game you feel should have more depth or additional tools? I mean, the game's pretty amazing, and the tools, the kind of toolbox it gives you is pretty complete. But there is one thing in the game that I think I wish had a bit more depth, but I can completely understand that practically it just can't be any bigger because there's only so much you can squeeze in the book. And is that some of the oracles I wish had more results, but I think that's mainly because I've been rolling on them so much, and some of the oracles, namely the character descriptor and the settlement name, I've rolled the same thing a lot and have to re-roll a lot. But I mean, they're still pretty amazing, and it's a very easy thing to homebrew your own kind of character table, or there are plenty out there that you can just kind of use that exist on other people's sites. So it is such a minor quibble that it's, it barely even registers as a problem. And there's a bonus question too from John. It's, what are 3 of your favourite novels? Funny you should ask. I've got them right here. I would say that my 3 favourite novels, in no particular order, are Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. It's bleak, but it's great. Then I would say The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon. That's a pretty amazing book as well. Love that one. The Heart of the Matter by Graham Greene. Again, it's depressing, but it's amazing. And then, obviously, I was only allowed to pick 3, but I've gone and done more anyway. Honourable mentions, The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. Love that book. White Teeth by Zadie Smith. It's a great book. And the book I'm reading currently, I think, will probably end up on my favourite all-time list because it's actually extraordinary. It is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. That's an incredible book. And yeah, that will definitely end up in my kind of top 10 of all time. I'm pretty sure, even though I haven't finished it, unless there's some really stupid twist at the end, but I doubt there will be. I have every trust in Miss Bennett. Okay, next, friend of the show, Steve Morrison from the Errant Adventures podcast asks over on Twitter, if you were going to start the podcast again, but for whatever reason you couldn't play Iron Swan or Starforged, what would your system of choice be? Well, that's a good question, Steve. I think for this story, if it was this story and this kind of sci-fi setting, then something like Lasers and Feelings or Lady Blackbird would be cool. Also, there's a game called Bucket of Bolts, which I've not played and I've not even read, but it looks really interesting. I think that could be a good way to explore this world and this kind of story in this setting. If I wasn't limited to a sci-fi setting or this story, I would really love to give the 1,000-Year-Old Vampire a spin. I think that looks amazing. There's also a game called Delve, not the Iron Swan supplement. It's a game by Anna Blackwell, which is a kind of a solo dungeon crawling game that looks super interesting. Another one that I've got but haven't managed to play yet. But yeah, again, too many games, not enough time. Redstone Archender asks on Twitter, if you could remove one thing from our collective consciousness, what would it be? Well, obviously we are about to enter year 3 of a deadly global pandemic. We are living in a world that is being slowly choked by climate change and late-stage capitalism. So there's a lot of real things in the world that I wish that as a society we could just remove with a click of our fingers. But honestly, I think I'd just say Rise of Skywalker, because it just makes me sad every time I think of it. I don't want to be another guy on the internet complaining about Star Wars, but that was bad. That was very bad. Actually, NFTs. Get rid of those damn apes out of my life forever. I wouldn't miss those. I'm just sad that I know what they are. Okay. Next and last question is from Gemma Lee Thornton, aka my wife, who asks on YouTube, who'd play the characters if this was a movie? Now, that is a great question, and it's one that I think about all the time, because I think when you are role-playing anything, whenever you come up with an NPC, anytime you come up with a character, I think subconsciously you envision them, and a lot of the time you envision an actor playing them, and I think that's totally normal. And I make a point of putting in a Pinterest page that I've got headshots of actors that I think would play the roles of my characters when I come up with them, and I do that just so it's easy for me to instantly think about who they are, what they look like, and how they carry themselves. So I'm going to run through my dream cast for The Bad Spot, the movie, and just with this caveat in place that whoever you imagine playing any of these characters, whatever you think they look like, that's what they look like. Please just enjoy this as whatever you imagine is happening. This is just my casting of my hypothetical movie that plays in my head when I play the game. Okay, so I have Indira Varma playing Professor Zari Darwin, who is Archer's mentor, who disappeared through the Iron Gate, and who he is desperately searching for. That's the heart of his kind of ongoing vow. Charlotte Rampling plays Blake Sutton, who is the navigator leading the Kraken clan's search for Iron Gates across the Outlands. I have Jimon Hunsu playing Severinus Kane. He's the Union leader from Rust who helps Archer and Luna with their prison break in the season finale. I have Tessa Thompson as the Conduit, the shady underworld fence or connection with mysterious motives who is unafraid to double-cross anyone for any reason. Then I have, as Azrael Vega, Daniel Dai Kim. He's the powerful, mystical leader of Clan Thorn. And now, the leads. For Luna, aka the kid, aka the one person keeping Archer alive, aka the only competent character in the show, is played by Allegra Acosta, who you might have seen in Marvel's The Runaways. I actually didn't have Luna that well envisioned in my head because I didn't really think she would amount to much when I rolled her up. But after I'd recorded that first episode, I just happened to catch a bit of an episode of The Runaways, and I just instantly saw her and I thought, that's it, that's Luna. And finally, Archer Barlow, aka Book, although please don't call him that, is played by Sean Gunn, who has the perfect look for Archer as I imagine him, and as an actor can totally nail that kind of depressed, lonely, sad sack, drifting through space, constantly being beaten up, blown up, shot at, and attacked by monsters. But like I said, whoever you imagine in your head, that's who's playing the characters in your version of this story. These are just my choices and who I think of when I'm playing. What do you think of those choices? Let me know in the comments below, or who do you want to see playing those roles? Any other casting suggestions? I want to hear them. And that's it. I'm sorry if I didn't get to answer your questions. If you're seeing your name on the screen now, it's because you sent me a question and I didn't have time to answer it. There was a lot of great questions I'd love to have spent more time answering, but unfortunately I couldn't get to them all. Next week, we will be back with the campaign. Season 2 of Starforged will begin, and we'll find out what on earth has happened to Archer and Luna. Submissions for Tale from the Drift are open, and if you want to get in touch and submit a piece of flash fiction inspired by some dice rolls, then please get in touch via the details that are on screen now. Until next week, when we will resume actually playing this game, it is farewell and safe passage.